See, that's the thing, including agriculture and that. I mean, the trades are not really popular with, especially my age group, like the millennial types. I mean, it's mostly corporate. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Blue collars kind of, I guess, phasing out of people's minds.
Hey guys, before the episode starts, I'd like to give a quick thanks to all my supporters. It's greatly appreciated that anyone who listens to this podcast supports it. It's very nice to know that people are willing to help out with this and that they see it to be something worth investing in. Right now, it's just faith. Thank you again, whoever you are. For donating to this podcast. It's by no means an obligation, so anyone listening to this, don't feel like you need to give me any kind of financial support for this. Any is appreciated, but again, I'm not going to ask that of you guys. I don't like to ask you guys to pay for a product like this. It's just something that I like to do for fun. So yeah, definitely not required, but greatly appreciated when it is. I also like to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Anchor. There will be an ad for that halfway through, but again, just thank all of you for so much for tuning in every episode and just giving your undivided attention and support, and it means so much to me. So thank all of you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode, I'm having another conversation with a new internet friend of mine. Before we get started, I'm going to let him give his own little introduction, who he is, where he comes from, and anything else he wants to share. So go ahead.
Hey everybody, this is Sal, plumber pipe fitter apprentice. You know, I also have a podcast called The Fresh Apprentice. Um, but yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So for anyone who hasn't heard it yet, what's your podcast all about?
So my podcast is all about, for the most part, I'd say it's just my experiences going through an apprenticeship. It's kind of a alternate choice in life, I guess you could say. Not many people who are millennials choose that path. So, I kind of shed light on the process of that, I guess you could say.
Gotcha. Cool. So you reached out to me over Reddit saying that it's always been your dream to own a farm or end up on one. So why don't we kind of start off there? Like, do you before this podcast, do you have any connection to agriculture, any experience in the field, any time spent around the farm?
You know what? Very little. I
Okay.
mean, let's see.
Sorry.
I would say no, it's all good. Um, I worked maybe a couple weeks on a farm in Utah. It was kind of a, I don't know. It was one of those farms where they hosted like pumpkin patch during October and
Hmm.
Halloween and stuff. But that's about it, I would say.
Okay. Awesome. So you have a very basic experience with agriculture.
Right.
So what about the farming lifestyle kind of attracted your attention? Like, what makes you want to eventually have a farm or end up on one at some point?
I would say the definitely it would be the work, kind of upkeeping it and everything, and just having something to do. Even if I was retired, so to say, I would still have something tangible, I guess,
Hmm.
something to do every day, kind of a routine for the
Yeah.
most part.
No, that definitely sounds awesome. I mean, I know that all the work that I do on farms is always enjoyable. I mean, it's hard work. It kind of beats you down, but it makes you kind of feel like you got something
Right.
done for the day. So it's definitely a good time.
Exactly.
So, I mean, like you mentioned, you're an apprentice for a pipe fitter. What kind of experiences does that come with? Before we jump into the ag talk, I'm kind of curious about what your side is.
Right. So, I was very fortunate. So there's an application process. It happens for about 3 to 4 months out of the year, and this is just pertaining to my local. I'm not really too sure how it works in other states, but yeah, it's about 3 to 4 months. There's an open application process. If you have experience, it definitely helps you get in. But even if you don't, um, they'll still accept you. For me, I had um, no experience at all um, with the plumbing pipe fitting industry, and I was lucky to get in. So at first, initially, what I had done was I had applied, and then there's mandatory math tests you got to take, and if you have certain qualifications, say welding qualifications or anything like that, it just increases your points. So the application system, it goes off of a point system. So
Hmm.
I think the minimum is 25 points. Just the math test on its own is worth 10, and then high school transcripts is worth about 5 or so, I'd say.
Hmm.
But any extra qualifications you have only increase the points. So I had just barely scratched the minimum there, and at first I didn't get in, but they needed about 40 more, so they accepted 2 more classes, which were 20 apiece, and I was just fortunate enough to get in.
Huh. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
what made you want to pursue that career?
It was completely by accident. So I've been ever since I was 18, and I moved to Utah and tried college. It wasn't for me, and then I moved back home, and ever since then, it's been. So let's see, what I'm 24 now. So from 18 to 23, all I've done was manual labor, warehouse, and anything of that nature. And it was just kind of on the off chance I saw, they were accepting applications, and I went ahead and applied and got in,
Huh.
luckily. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So now jumping into the ag side of the conversation. So you said that you don't really have too much experience with agriculture,
No.
but but you would like to. So what in particular, so like let's say like, would you be more interested in like the animal science side, like raising some cattle or some sheep or goats or pigs or something like that, or more of like the crop science side, like raising corn or trees or something like that, or what kind of appeals to you from agriculture?
Right. I would say maybe more of the animals. I have a little baby girl, and just seeing her interact with the world is pretty awesome. So I mean, animals definitely.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with you there. I'm a big fan of animal agriculture. I actually just got back from a walk where I went over to our school's farm and I went and checked on the cows. But
Oh, right on.
yeah, so no, that's awesome. So that that kind of brings me to the question of like, what I'm obviously you're on social media, you're involved in the podcasting community and that kind of stuff. What
Mhm.
kind of stuff have you seen on social media around like animal agriculture in particular, but just like agriculture in general?
I mean, the what I would say is mostly, I mean, documentaries.
Hmm.
Just from things me and my wife have watched. But that's kind of about it,
Hmm,
really.
interesting. And then like, do
Yeah.
you have, so where you come from, obviously we're both in the same state, but like in your neck of the woods, do you guys have like a lot of agricultural education in your schools and high school and college and that kind of stuff?
No, not at all. Actually,
Huh.
I would like to have seen more, all those kind of programs, but it's just really absent everywhere.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of surprising. I mean, I know that California is starting to get a little bit more bare in terms of that kind of stuff, but
Right.
we're still one of the most popular in terms of ag education in the states. So, huh?
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So, kind of the typical thing that I've seen a lot about like social media and stuff like that, and about animals and stuff and everything is that a lot of people have an issue with animal agriculture. They don't like that people are raising animals for one reason or another. Some people say it's
Right.
environmental. Some people say it's it's cruel or whatever. Um, so going into let's just say like you ended up starting working in animal agriculture, like do you think these would be things you'd have to deal with, or are you kind of just kind of trying to go off the radar and do your own thing, or like are uh, do you have any like fears about that kind of stuff?
Um, I mean, not really. I would say.
Hmm. That's good. Yeah. No, you'd be a rare one. A lot of people right now are kind of worried about their farms getting taken away because somebody complained about them and how they keep their pens clean or something stupid like that. But
Right,
that
right.
seems to be the thing nowadays. So, are you looking to have just kind of like a just like a fun little like side farm? You trying to make a commercial off of it? Like, are you trying to make money, or are you just kind of looking for something to hang back and chill with?
Right. Yeah, I would say much more for leisure, something to just kind of have the family around. And
Yeah,
I don't know, for me personally, commercializing it would kind of just take that away a little bit,
yeah,
I
no, that's
guess.
fair. No, that makes a lot of sense, and that also kind of lowers your risk of that kind of stuff. Like I mentioned, like it's most like the larger commercial style
Right,
farms that they're going after, so that might keep you safe.
right, right.
So yeah, no, that's cool. So let me see here. So you're from California, like I am. What area are you in? Like what kind of part of California?
Oh, actually, I'm in Nevada.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that.
oh, I could have sworn you said California.
No, the time zones, I guess. I apologize.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Cool.
I'm your neighbor.
Gotcha. Cool. So like over in Nevada is pipe fitting kind of a common practice over there, or is that almost like an exclusive job?
See, that's the thing, including agriculture and that. I mean, the trades are not really popular with, especially my age group, like the millennial types. I mean, it's mostly corporate. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Blue collars kind of, I guess, phasing out of people's minds. But
gotcha.
yeah,
Huh. Yeah, no, that kind of makes sense. Nevada's kind of easing towards the more what's the word I'm looking for? The more kind of like office jobs, I guess, or like
right,
the less like get your hands dirty kind of jobs.
right, right, right.
Hmm. So if you were to go into agriculture, would you stay in Nevada, or like do you have anywhere in mind that you'd like to set up shop?
Somewhere with more green. It's just desert out here everywhere you go.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Like somewhere like Colorado or somewhere a little bit more fun to look at.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. If I ever get a chance to start a farm, I'm going somewhere where I can actually look at something and it'd be nice.
Right.
So awesome. So like in terms of like agriculture or farming, is there anything that you don't that like you want to know more about, and any questions you have about the process or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, how do you even start? I mean, I understand buying land or whatever,
Hmm.
but after you've purchased land, then I mean, what's the next step after that? Is it just kind of a free for all, or
So really, it depends on your operation, and I'm not gonna pretend
yeah,
to be an expert on how to start a farm, but I've looked into it quite a bit. Because
yeah,
when I get older, I'd like to have one, but you're right. So like to start off, you get the land. It depends on what land you get and what you want to use it for. You need to determine if
hmm,
if you're going to raise some crops, you need to kind of have soil analysis done, make sure your crops are suitable for raising what you want to
gotcha,
raise, and then
yeah,
if you want to raise livestock, you want to put up some fencing. You want to make sure that it's the proper structural security, that way the fencing doesn't
right,
get torn down or anything. Make sure no coyotes
right,
can get in or anything like that. Really the next step for that, like if you want to do pastures, you want to make sure that all your pasture land is well taken care of, is well irrigated, the water is easily accessible to the cattle or
yeah,
any kind of animal you want to have. I tend to go with cattle because that's my go-to, but
yeah,
um and if you're trying to go for like a feedlot operation, you have to build all the fences, you have to build all the gates and all that kind of stuff, and you have to build it to a point where the animals are able to live there and be safe and not get hurt or anything like
right,
that. So that's kind of your step one. And then before
right,
any animals move in, then you want to make sure you have enough finances for feed and for storage for that feed.
right,
And that's kind of
right,
like where you want to decide like, okay, well, how many head am I going to have? What is the diet, what's going to be the diet for those animals? Like if you're
Yeah.
not using it for commercial use, then a pasture might be a little bit easier to manage. Or if you're trying to make a little bit of money, you probably want to feed some grain into them, fatten them up a little bit, and sell them on the side. Um,
Right.
and then, once you kind of figure that out, it's all about like budgeting, figuring out how much you can invest into these things. And then, if you kind of, really, like, the animal should be the last thing that you buy, because obviously you don't want to
Yeah.
buy animals and not have any food for them or any water for them or any
Right.
housing for them. Actually, unfortunately, I know some people who've done that. They buy some animals
Oh
without
no.
having even the fences put up. They're just roaming on open land. So, but yeah, no, it's all about just kind of figuring out, having every piece in place first, and then you get your animals in there, and then you start your operation. So, um,
Right.
that's kind of my recommendation is, if you're looking into, let's say, cattle, make sure you know how much fencing you're going to need, and you get that built, and then you know how much feed you're going to need for how many head, how much water you're going to need, and you have the trough built, and you have your well all set up and all that kind of stuff before you even let a single cow touch your land.
Right.
Because you don't want to go in there without anything prepared, because then you not only lose money, but you lose your animals too, and
Yeah.
nobody wants that. So
Right.
so hope that
So
kind
all
of.
the prep work
Right.
first.
Yeah, no, I actually have a few books that are like perfect for like backyard farms kind of thing, like small farms, and
Yeah.
it like breaks down like exactly how to build fencing, how to build like facilities that'll help the animals stay calm, how to grow pasture grass, how to feed them properly, like all this stuff on how to actually start a farm.
Yeah.
I've read that book so many times. It's just, I don't know, it's all dependent on, for one, your budget, and for two, what you want to do with it. Like,
Right.
you're not going to start off by building a 400-acre farm and then just making money right off the bat. You have to start small and kind of build your way up, and
Yeah.
that's even if that's your goal. If you're trying to keep it small, then maybe you could start off where you want, and then you're good.
Right.
So that'd
Huh.
be that'd be my advice to starting out.
Gotcha. Now, I mean, is there like a certain, so I guess for like a small family,
Hmm.
um, is there like a certain amount of land you would say to kind of, because I know like an acre to me is giant,
Hmm.
right? But if you're adding animals and things on there, obviously there has to be more room, right?
Right. On average, and again, it depends on your operation. Like, let's just say you're doing cattle.
Yeah.
Pasture cattle average like 1 to 2 head per acre.
Okay.
So they need a decent amount of land. I mean,
Right.
if you're not gonna have a super big operation, like I've heard that a decent sized family farm is like 10 acres is pretty good. Um,
Okay.
if you go into like anything past, I think it's like 50 to 100 acres is considered commercial. I can't remember what the number is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say like 10, like 20 at the most if you're looking for like a decent sized family farm. But I think that 10 would
Right.
serve your purposes just fine.
Gotcha.
And that's, that doesn't count your house.
Right. Right.
So, but
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of it's kind of standard. And again, it depends on your area too. Some states have different regulations. I know here in California they regulate it at,
Hmm.
I think it's 1 head or 2 head per acre or something like that.
Gotcha. Wow.
So
Huh.
yeah, no, there's definitely a lot that goes into it. It's not something you can kind of just pick up and
Just
start
jump
rolling
in.
with. Yeah, it does tend to cause it's a little difficult to just jump in and start rolling. It kind of, you know there are some people who get a little optimistic and they hop in there and then they realize that they did not know what they were signing up for.
Right. It's kind of
So
all at once.
right. Yeah, no, it usually
Yeah.
takes a little while. I mean, like, my dad's looking into starting a farm for when he retires, and he's been looking into it for the past couple of years, and he's got nothing so far. Like, you got to find
Yeah.
land, you got to find the resources, you got to find the money. Like, it takes a long time.
Right. I could imagine.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's definitely like that's kind of one of the things that kind of people miss out on, is they think that farming is like the super easy. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna start a farm and it'll be great. Yeah, no, that's that's definitely the wrong attitude to have. If you're looking for an easy job, do not be
Right.
a farmer. But yeah, I think it's still worth it though. I still have a lot of fun.
Of course, yeah. That's, I mean, because with anything in life, it's obviously going to take uh, a little bit of elbow grease.
Right.
But wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So does that kind of answer your question on how to start a farm?
Yeah. Oh, one more question. What? So when you're referring to head, what is that?
So a head is a measurement of each animal. So if you have 50 cows, you
Okay.
have 50 head.
Okay. So it's
So
purring. Okay.
yeah. So okay. So I just looked it up, and actually it's 1.5 to 2 acres to feed a cow and a calf.
Gotcha. Cow and calf 1.25 quart. Okay.
So yeah, no,
Hmm.
kind of just depends on what you're trying to do with it, though. You know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and then like kind of one of the bigger things, at least in California, is water. You got to find somewhere that you can actually have a decent well that'll keep you alive for a little while,
All right. Right.
especially because all the regulations here.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Oh yeah, no,
So,
it's
I mean, what are with those regulations? What is commonly run into? I guess you could say, like, in order to overcome to build a farm or
mhm.
something like that. Like, what's the most common regulations or?
uh one of the largest struggles is water
Mm-hmm.
rights. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, especially even like newer farmers, but even a lot of older farmers are running into this. They will buy land that the water rights
Right.
on that land is restricted. So like they'll try to use water to irrigate their fields, and then their well runs dry and they can't get any more water because
Okay.
they're not allowed to. So that is
Yeah.
one of the larger struggles. At least in California, like I said, it's there's a variation in different areas, but
Mm.
water is a big one. Use of certain like chemicals is a big one. So if you have a small
Right.
crop, a small field of crops, you're only allowed to use a certain number or a certain amount of pesticides, which tends to be an issue. That's why a lot of small farmers go organic, because it's a little bit easier to manage, but it does
Yeah.
cost a bit more to start out with. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of one of the struggles too, is size relative to how much you're willing to deal with from the
Yeah.
government. So it's just a matter of picking your battles, kind of deciding, okay, well, if I decide to run a farm this big, there's going to be regulations on it to this size, because you still have like property tax and that kind of stuff too you got to worry
Right.
about.
Right.
So managing that plus all of the potential regulations around it is just kind of, you got to pick your battles. So
Right.
and that's what farmers today are doing. I mean, I know a lot of farmers that I knew when I was a little kid, and they're selling their farms
Mm.
now because they can't get water to keep their farm going. So it's kind of just
Oh man,
it's a struggle.
that's horrible.
Hmm. And once if you're closer to like the urban side of things too, like if you have a farm around the outskirts of a city, you might have a
Uh.
big business try to buy out your farm and turn that into a new shopping center or something like that. So
Right.
that's a slightly less common struggle in California than in other places, but it is still a struggle.
Mm. Man.
So there's a lot to consider.
Right.
But no, I mean, there's so many things that's against, like there's so many obstacles to overcome to get there. Not that
Right.
I would ever discourage somebody from going for it, but I mean,
Right.
it's a tough lifestyle to live nowadays.
I believe it. I 100% believe that.
Hmm. I mean, there are some people who make it work. I know some blueberry farmers up in Woodlake, and I mean, they have this organic blueberry farm. They make tons of money off of it. They have very, very little regulations. Like they're living pretty good up there. So must have figured
Nice.
something out. So, and then I don't know what the regulations are like in Nevada. If they have, I mean, I know that they have some different regulations, but I can't imagine they're as strict as California's.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, just judging by the amount of people moving here from
Hmm.
California, it's probably you know.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a struggle. So, I
Man,
mean, that's just on the agricultural side of things. Like the regulations on every other thing, every other industry here is, you know, almost worse.
oh gosh.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, agriculture is pretty heavily regulated, but there are a lot of industries here that could afford to move to other states.
Right. Right.
But
Jeez.
yeah, so it's something else here.
Now, so most of our produce here in the U.S. does come from California, though, right?
Yes, most of it, yeah. The only stuff that we import, I mean, is like we
Yeah.
export a bunch of stuff, but the most of the stuff that we import
Right.
are either foods that we can't grow here, so like bananas, coconuts,
Yeah.
coffee beans, like stuff that we just can't grow, and
Right.
stuff that's not in season. So that's why you have oranges in the summer, because oranges typically grow in the winter, and so
Hmm.
in places that are south of the equator, like Mexico,
Yeah.
they can grow foods that aren't naturally grown in our part of the world at the
Right.
time that it's grown. So that's kind of
Right.
the main reason for trade, is that way we can get stuff that we normally wouldn't have access to.
Huh. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and California is actually, like they said before, that if California was its own country, it would have the ninth largest
Yeah.
economy in the world.
Yeah, I believe I read that too.
Mm-hmm.
That's man, that is so wild.
Yep, and most of that's due to agriculture. I mean, we are the
Right.
breadbasket of the world, and I mean, the United
Right.
States overall is the United States feeds more countries than any other country in the world, but California is kind of the leading power in that.
Right. Right.
Because I mean, there's very few things that we don't grow in California.
I know you would think all those regulations there when that just kind of hinder the ability to kind of do what you got to do on the agriculture side.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we have farmers going out like mad. There are some
Right.
commodities that aren't even being grown in California anymore just because they're not making money. But there are
Man.
some that are still, they're still holding strong. They're doing everything they can.
Right.
Just the
Right.
problem is a lot of the small farmers are struggling, and a lot of the large farmers are trying to keep by.
Right.
So,
I guess what is so if you've got hundreds of acres,
mhm.
what would your most profitable crop be?
It depends on what you're growing. I mean, if somebody is, or it also depends on your area. I know in my
Yeah.
area in Central California, nut trees are doing extremely well. Like um,
Oh wow.
pistachios, almonds, walnuts. Like, and in my hometown of Tulare, they have nut trees. Like a lot of dairymen are even taking out their dairies, and they're raising nut trees instead because of how much money they're
Huh.
making. And so they'll have a few hundred acres worth of almonds or of pistachios.
Right.
Citrus also does really well here. Like we're the number one supplier of citrus in the world. So
Oh wow.
a lot of citrus farmers are making a decent amount of money off of a few hundred acres of oranges or lemons or mandarins.
Huh.
Dairy is still one of the most popular commodities in California because we're still the number one dairy provider for the world. So it kind of just, again, it's circumstantial for your environment.
Right. Right.
Like I know up north they don't grow a whole lot of any of this stuff. They have like a lot of different fruits and berries and stuff like that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep. So definitely a lot to think about. I know like down south over in like Texas and Oklahoma area they have tons and tons of cotton and corn, and I mean every state has
Yeah.
corn. Like corn's the only crop that's grown in every state. But
Really.
oh yeah, but they're like the corn belt. They have like the most corn, the most cotton, the most like a lot of those like row crops.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's a it's a lot.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
Hmm. Yep. No, and to get in is I don't know if it's harder to get in or harder to get out. Actually, it's really easy to get out. So it's a lot harder to get in than it is to get out.
Wow.
Hmm. Because I mean, you're dealing with a massive curve of economic problems and regulations
Right.
and all these things against you trying to get in, plus the financial issues and all that. And then you're in there. You can sell your stuff at any time. It's just that selling it at the right time tends to be an issue because you have some people who don't want to sell their farms because of it's their family legacy or whatever. You have some
Right.
people that
Right.
don't like there's tons of reasons to not sell your farm. Problem
Right.
is if you don't, you're probably gonna go broke. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a it's an ongoing struggle. It's something that we worry about all the day, all the time with our own farmers here.
Wow. So I mean, when you're running like a commercial operation like that, like you can't just stop growing your crops or take like a break or anything, huh? It has to
Only
keep moving.
Yeah. So I mean, the only time that they take a break from growing crops is that, if they need to let the field rest, and so they do like crop rotation,
Yeah,
they'll take a break for
yeah,
that. But it's not because the farmer needs a break. It's just because they don't want to leach their field too much and they need some time for it to regenerate.
right, right,
But with nut trees and with animals and with like oranges and crops that don't need to be replanted, they don't
yeah.
ever take breaks. I mean, it's
They're going.
yeah, they're going 24/7, 365
Yeah,
days a year. And even if they're not producing, they're still growing the fruit, so they still have to spray it, they have to give it fertilizers, they have to protect it from bugs. Like
yeah,
there's all kinds of stuff that still goes into it. So the farmers work, year round, 24 hours a day. Like they're up at 3 in the morning, they're going to bed at midnight. Like
yeah.
there's no breaks for them.
Right, right.
Cows don't take Christmas off, so they're always out there. So like they'll be milking whether it's 3 in the morning or 6 in the evening or whatever. They're out there still doing their thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what? So would it be so with all these like produce that's organic and everything? Is it more beneficial to run a farm organic or continue how it's been going? Because I know like the pesticides and everything. I know that's like a big deal to people.
Mm-hmm. Well, not to mention it's expensive. If you can't afford to get
Right,
pesticides, then don't use them.
right.
I would say it, just like everything else, it depends.
Yeah, yeah.
Organic has shown to be a very profitable business, but it
Uh
costs a
huh.
lot to get into it. Like
Right.
if you're raising a conventional farm, so like let's say you're raising corn that it isn't organic.
Mm.
Before you register for it to be organic, it has to be free of any kind of pesticides, fertilizers, any kind of chemicals for 3 years before you can even apply.
Oh wow.
And then once you apply, then they have to monitor you for, I don't remember. I think it's a couple more years. I can't remember how long it is now. And you're not allowed
Yeah.
to use any chemicals of any kind, any pesticides, any GMOs, any kind of product or style that's not verified to be organic, or else they won't
Right.
certify you. And then once they certify you, then you can stay that way. You just have to renew your certification every now and then.
Right. Right.
But yeah,
Wow.
so it like I said, it does make money for people who do it well, but the
Uh huh.
conversion rate takes a long time. And if you're going to do it from scratch, like if you're just going to start a farm and make it organic, you have to do all kinds
Yeah.
analyses on the soil, make sure it's got no leftover chemicals in it. You have to
Right.
it's really hard to keep organic produce alive too, just because the organic methods of like organic pesticides tend to not be as effective as chemical
Right.
pesticides, so you have the chance of
Right.
your crops dying a lot easier or not just not growing at all. So
Yeah.
there's just a bit more of an uphill battle, but the payoff does seem to be pretty good if you do it for a while.
Right. Huh.
But yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, no, I mean, I think that it I can't talk today. It's entirely
It's all
dependent.
good.
It's entirely dependent on your financial situation, what you're wanting out of it, what
Yeah.
kind of what makes you feel best. Because like I don't know necessarily. I think that, I mean, obviously farmers who grow organic get a premium for it, or else they wouldn't grow organic.
Right.
I don't know how long it takes for that style to become profitable.
Right. Right.
That's why a lot of farmers will start off conventional, then they'll switch to organic, where they'll have like a
Huh.
separate field that they grow organic. Well, they have a
Right.
primary field. It just kind of depends. Some start out
Right.
they do just fine, but
Yeah. That makes sense.
mm, I'd argue that organic livestock are even harder to raise than organic crops.
Organic livestock is.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, oh well, obviously you can't feed them anything with hormones or anything, right?
Right. There's no hormones. There's no antibiotics. So if they get sick, then you can't sell them.
That's right.
What most people do, because like there was this whole misconception that if you raise your animals organically and they get sick, then you just let them die. That's tends to be not how it
Yeah.
works unless you have a pure organic operation. Most
Right.
people have like one field that's organic and one field that's conventional. And if they have
Yeah.
an organic cow get sick, then they give her an antibiotic and move her to the conventional field. That way she's not gonna die.
Yeah.
And they just have one less cow in their pasture. But it doesn't like change operation at all if they do that. So it's as long as that one pasture is 100% organic. But that means that
Yeah.
they can't eat any grass, hay, corn, nothing that has any level of pesticides on it or has been genetically modified. Like their
Right.
diet has to be very, very strict. They have to be confined to their area for a long period of time. They can't ever have any hormones in them at all, any veterinary treatment. Like they're very, very strict on that
Oh
stuff.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
So they just kind of got to live how they live. So no vet can come in at all. Like
I think it depends what the vet does. Like if the vet just comes in
yeah.
for an inspection, it's fine. But if the vet gives them a shot or
Okay.
anything, they have to be moved.
Right. Oh wow. Huh.
So it's very, and like the vet has to be cleared by the organic certifier that he's okay to do his job, and if the organic certifier catches that the vet does anything that would disqualify the animal, then it gets
Right.
moved. So
Wow.
it's intense.
Huh. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of complexity to starting off in agriculture.
Yeah. So I mean, so I listened to one of your episodes with I think it was another guest. So most of the cows, so most of the meat or beef in supermarkets or anything is those are dairy cows, right?
Yeah. So like, anything you eat like McDonald's or like, other fast food restaurants, any
Yeah.
burgers, anything like that. Um,
Right.
an okay, like a decent amount of the beef in like supermarkets and stuff, that all comes from
Yes.
dairy cattle. And then like the higher dollar, like your prime and like choice steaks and that kind of
Right.
stuff, and like burgers you get in a restaurant, that's usually like your steers. And you try not to eat bulls. I mean, you can, but bull meat
Yeah.
tends to be really, really tough. But yeah, steers tend to go towards like the higher quality burgers and meat, and like the lower quality stuff tends to go into, or it comes from dairy cows. It tends to go into everything else.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. And
Wow.
that's another thing people don't understand either, is that dairy cattle still become beef cattle eventually. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm going to raise a dairy so my cows don't have to
Right.
die. It's like, sorry, they're still going to get there. There's not they're going to get there yet.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So,
That's interesting.
but it's kind of a tribute to the idea that we don't waste anything in agriculture. If
Right.
if a cow dies naturally and it's not sick or anything, we're still going to use it to make
Right.
food. And
Right. Of course.
when an animal is slaughtered, they use like every piece of it. The only thing they throw away is the brain and the spinal cord. Everything else gets turned
Uh-huh.
into meat.
Wow.
Like even like the hooves and like the bones and that kind of stuff gets turned like dog bones. So
Right.
it doesn't get wasted even a little bit.
That's good.
hmm But yeah. So, and that kind of goes back to the, like if you're thinking about raising it, the, cattle, deciding between beef and dairies is also an important question to ask. Because if you're going to raise dairy, you have to have a way to milk them. Because
Right.
you can't raise dairy and not milk them, or else they get sick.
Really?
So if dairy
Huh.
cows spend too long without being milked, that they
Yeah.
develop like it's called lactose toxicity, and it
Uh-huh.
like it makes them sick from inside because they've got so much built up milk, it just starts to infect their udder, and then they can die from it.
Right.
So you have to milk them
Wow.
frequently.
Huh.
hmm Which is why most dairymen will milk their cows 3 times a day just to make sure they don't have any issues with that.
Now, would that be the minimum 3 times a day? Would you say?
Not necessarily. There are some that do it twice a day, but I would say no less than
Yeah.
that.
Right.
I'd say probably like,
Wow.
depending on your operation and how old your cows are, like 2 to 4 times a day is probably average.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you go less than that,
Huh.
you're running the risk of them getting sick.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Now, obviously, like, sorry, what were you saying?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah. There's there's a lot to consider when you're taking care of animals. But
Right.
yeah. What was your question?
Oh, no, I was just gonna ask about the cost of like equipment and everything, like, cause,
Oh,
cause I know down here at one of the casinos, um, they have this. It's annually like it was crazy. Annually they have those where they ride horses and stuff here, or like the rodeos, and I'm just looking at like some of the trailers these guys have, like even just their trucks, like F-350s everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
giant, livestock trailers. I can only imagine the cost of equipment to, transport animals and everything. That's another thing I didn't really think about either.
Yeah, no, the equipment is a whole nother question. I mean, if you're gonna get trailers or like any kind of milking equipment or a
Yeah,
tractor or anything, it's gonna cost you quite a bit. I mean, like
right,
the used ones, the old ones are in like the hundreds of thousands. Like
right,
it's
right.
it's it's almost impossible to find one that's of any decent quality under 100,000.
Yeah,
So that's another big financial investment too, and you want to make sure you have all that stuff before you get any other animals or any crops in or anything because you don't want to not have it when you need it.
right, right.
So that's another that's another thing you got to consider when you're going into starting a farm is like, okay, well, how much equipment am I going to need, and
Yeah,
how far in advance do I need to have it before I get my materials.
right,
So because you're going to need like a disker for your field, you're going to need a trailer for your animals, you're going to need a milker, and it's just it
right.
gets to be pretty pricey.
I
Like
know.
the
I'm just looking at them like, holy cow! There's
mm-hmm.
like six figures driving on the road next to me right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, and like the equipment is what tends to cost the most out of any kind of ag operation. Like doesn't matter what you're growing, the equipment's always going to be the most expensive thing.
Right. Can
Like sometimes
only
even the
imagine.
land pays itself off before the equipment does.
It's getting all that machinery and everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Which I just looked it up and I was mistaken. It's not called lactose toxicity. It's called mastitis.
Mastitis.
Mm-hmm. Which I don't know where I got lactose toxicity. I've treated cows for mastitis. I don't know where. Anyways, beside the point. But yeah, no, cows can accumulate too much milk and it causes an infection in their udders. I was right about that part, but wrong name.
Man, that is trippy. So you
Mm-hmm.
got a cow has to be milked, otherwise it'll get sick. I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm. Now that only goes for dairy cows though. Beef cows, they're
Right.
fine. They don't need to be milked.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So their calves will milk them just enough for them to be fine. I mean, it would still happen to them if they didn't have any calves to drink their milk, but
Yeah.
they naturally get rid of enough milk to kind of balance themselves out. Whereas dairy cows, we bred them to a point where they produce so much milk that if they don't get milk, that they're going to have issues.
Right. Huh.
So,
Now, would a machine, so a milking machine, I'm assuming it's called, right?
mm-hmm. Milker.
So those you would only need those if you're running what many cattle or many dairy cows, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would say you would need to invest into that unless you have a pretty significant amount of dairy cows.
Yeah.
If you have a small pasture of them, then I mean,
Right.
it might not hurt to have a cheap milker, but it's not really something
Yeah.
that is worth the massive investment. Like I don't think you need an entire milk barn. Might help to have some kind of facility for it, but I mean,
Yeah.
if you have I couldn't give you a number on how many would justify a milker, but I would say like
Yeah.
if you're in like the 50s, then probably yeah. But like if you're having like
Yeah.
10 cows, you don't really need a whole machine for that.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's just another scaling thing, trying to figure out like, oh yeah, if I'm gonna have an entire 300-acre land worth of cows and calves, I should probably get some idea on how I want to
Yeah.
milk them. Um,
Right.
But if you're gonna do that, it's more worth it to invest in an actual dairy than it is to just start them off on a grass fed operation, anyways.
Right. So I mean, if you were running like a small pasture, could you still uh would you still be able to sell livestock if it was just like a small pasture?
Yeah, I mean, your profits would probably be pretty small, but yeah, you could still. I
Yeah.
mean, let's just say you have 10 to 12 head out there, and like three of them dropping their bulls, you can castrate them, fatten up a little bit, and you can sell them at the feedlot and still make a decent amount of money.
Wow.
I mean, the only difference in like the commercial size and like the small size is literally
Yeah.
just the number of cattle you have. Like you don't have to like apply to be like a commercial farm. It's just you can sell however much you want.
Oh, okay. Wow.
hmm The only thing is though, once you get past a certain size in terms of either head or acreage or dollar amount or whatever, you might get
Right.
picked up by an LLC. So you might be part of like a massive like corporation of
Yeah.
farmers, but you don't like for one that's not necessarily required. It just kind of helps out once you're at a larger scale and you need like the business support. But for two,
Got
if
you.
if you're still small, then there's not really much point in you doing that anyway because you're just going to be selling
Right.
a few at a time.
Right. Huh.
hmm
So
Actually,
I mean, sorry,
no, you're
continue.
you're good. I was looking at something on my desk. Go ahead.
Oh, it's all good. Um, so I mean, so obviously, like, when you're planting crops and everything, that does take a toll on the field, right?
hmm
And I mean, is there a way for it to recover on its own, or would you have to pump something into the soil, or
So soil is kind of a unique topic. Like we're actually still trying to figure out how soil works.
yeah,
A lot of environmentalists and a lot of soil scientists have some theories. Some have been
mm-hmm,
confirmed. Some of them are still kind of experimental. There are a
right?
lot of farmers right now that are actually working on regenerative agriculture, which is the idea that the soil will regenerate itself. Um,
Oh, wow.
but that requires like low till or no till, which means you don't till your soil at all. You leave it alone, and
Uh-huh.
you can take your crops out and you can replant, but you don't mix up the soil at all. You just kind of let it preserve its natural state, and it'll repair
Oh,
itself.
wow.
You can till, but usually if you till and you don't do a cover crop of any kind, you have to
Yeah,
insert artificial fertilizers that will give the soil the nutrients that it lost. So
right, right,
in the long run, that ends up probably costing more, but it depends on the size of your operation. If you can afford to do no till, then the evidence seems to show that it is better for it, but it's still experimental, so we might not know something
right,
about it.
right.
But yeah, so the soil is almost a living organism in and of itself. So if the soil isn't like taken care of properly, your crops won't grow. And
Gotcha.
so you need to kind of have that in mind whenever you're doing crop rotation. That you need to have, you need to have a cover crop sometime between the first crop that you harvested and then the next crop that's coming in. And usually that cover crop will,
Oh,
will, will hold the place of the structure of the soil, and it'll also
yeah,
provide nutrients back to the soil. Like there are actually some cover crops that are genetically modified to take nutrients from the surrounding area, so like nitrogen from the air, and they'll put it back
yeah.
into the soil to try to revive it.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I
So
mean, what crop would do that best then?
as far as
Is that,
cover crops go,
yeah.
legumes are really good about that. They're
Oh,
good.
wow.
They're good at absorbing oxygen and nitrogen and using it to kind of revitalize soil. Um,
Yeah,
Other than that, like other crops haven't like commercial crops haven't really been adapted to a point where they can do that yet. There are
right.
crops who have been adapted to not leach the soil as much, or like
Yeah,
to try to like minimize the amount of soil like nutrient loss in soil as possible. But we're
yeah,
still kind of far from the state where we can have no normal crops that can just put it back in there. But
right.
we are developing methods on taking care of the soil before the crop gets put in, so you don't even have to worry about that.
Huh. So what would be a good low till crop then?
Um, I know that they've been experimenting with corn quite a bit. That corn can kind of
Yeah,
hold its own without too much tillage.
right.
I don't know. I think they're testing it with cotton. I might be wrong about that. But I know that kind of
Yeah,
because corn is kind of our universal like immortal crop. Like that, corn is one of the most popular crops for a reason. It does not die easily. So I think they're experimenting with corn just because of that. But I don't know if they've actually composed like a list of what crops can survive no-till and which crops can't, because it's so new of a technique. So yeah, corn is one of our like immortal crops. It doesn't die
right,
easily, and so
right.
I think they're still experimenting with it. So they don't really have
Yeah,
like a list of like, oh yeah, these crops aren't going to die to no-till, but we because it's so new, we're still trying to figure that out.
yeah.
But
Huh.
no, soil science is interesting stuff if you kind of figure out how much they've actually been working on with it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine because it's pretty much like raw earth
hmm
and still trying to figure out how it works and
hmm
everything.
I mean, they're even trying to transplant it into external planets like Mars and the Moon to see if it'll
Oh,
actually
wow.
crops grow on different environments.
Wow.
hmm So it's our soil for some reason is insanely fertile. So we're trying to figure out how to make it stay that way.
Right. Man, that'd be so awesome. Just send it to another planet and
Hmm.
have things grow there.
Right. Now our only problem is trying to figure out how to make more soil.
Because we're running out of it, right? Like fertile soil.
Right, because the top layer of soil takes 1,000 years to regenerate.
Oh,
So
geez.
yeah, so if we like, let's say we build a building on top of fertile land, it's going to take
Yeah.
way too long for that land to be usable again. So
Right.
we're kind of, that's why the urbanization problem is something that we're still kind of stressing about, because it's not like we can just like knock down a Walmart and build a, regrow a farm. Like that soil is
Yeah.
no longer usable for our lifetime. So
Right.
we got to find another option, basically.
Now, is that 1,000 year soil regeneration? Is that also after like one crop, or is it kind of like does it kind of build up as you put more crops down there?
So the 1,000 year regeneration is mostly related to like if we've killed the soil, the crops won't
Yeah.
really damage the soil that much to a point where they have to regenerate like an entire 1,000 years. But
Yeah.
if you leach the soil too much, which means you put too many crops in there that take all the nutrients out and you don't put any back, then that
Okay.
that
Yeah.
takes about 1,000 years to regenerate.
Right. So I mean, I'm assuming if you were to just pour a slab of concrete onto the soil, that would that would kind of do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it'd pretty much be dead at that point. So
Oh
like I
man.
like this looking up an article right now, it says it takes 200 to 400 years to form just a centimeter of soil.
Oh man.
So if we're trying to get a few inches of soil to try to regrow our crops, it's going to take us a little while. So that's why it's so important that we try to preserve the land that we do have and we don't let it get taken by buildings anymore. Was there anything else you were curious about, or any other questions I can answer for you while we're here?
Um, you know what? I'm sure there's a lot more, and just my mind is kind of blanking right
Yeah, no, I mean, if you think of anything else, then let me know. I can answer it for you. You can even come back and have another discussion about it, or whatever
for
works.
sure.
So,
Yep, I'll definitely be back on for sure.
yeah,
I'll have a whole bunch of questions for you that
awesome. I'm ready for it. So,
time.
I think that kind of, I mean, that covers everything that I could think of. So, yeah, if you don't have anything else, then I'll give you a chance to kind of uh, plug everything, tell everyone where they can find you if you want them to find you, or I'll put all your links down in the description too. But yeah, this is kind of your chance for another promotion.
Right on. Yeah. So this is Sal with the Fresh Apprentice podcast. That's pretty much all I got. Anywhere podcasts are, it's under the Fresh Apprentice. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. I'm glad that you were able to join me. This has been you'll actually be my second to last episode of this season. So
Awesome.
yeah, so this will be fun. But yeah, no, thanks again for coming in and joining and talking about what it takes to start a farm. It was definitely a fun conversation.
For
You know,
sure.
I hope all of you enjoyed the episode. It was definitely a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Thank you again to our guest and to all of you who are tuning in. And thanks for all the support that you guys give on every episode. Thanks again to Faith for donating to this podcast. A monthly subscription, which again is not necessary or obligatory, but I greatly appreciate it all the same. Thanks again to our sponsor, Anchor, and all that you do in terms of financial investment of this podcast. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys. I hope to hear from you next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.